Yeah, I got Mr. Cummings to sign the petition, but we had to make it Euclidean because he likes Euclid too much.
Most people prefer the Euclidean to non-Euclidean. All right, so blank sheet of paper we're going to start using here in a little bit. What we're going to do is we're going to do some, I guess grammar talk would kind of be a little bit of what it is. We don't spend a lot of days doing like, okay, let's have grammar lesson on how to use commons and hyphens and all that kind of stuff. But with you having rough draft for Thursday, for Grapes of Wrath, I thought it might be a good time to take a look at some things with sentence structure because there are some things that tend to kind of pop up that aren't necessarily problematic, but it's nice to kind of have an understanding on how they work ahead of time as you're starting to work on an essay. So by no means am I going, if you've already written half your essay, go back and redo it, but this would be stuff to kind of keep in the forefront of your mind as you're moving forward. A couple reminders with stuff here. I Have a Dream, Bedford Reader, you're going to read for tomorrow. Bring your Bedford Reader with you because I could definitely see us taking a look at some specific paragraphs and whatnot in it. There's not a quiz or anything like that you have to worry about. It's just going to be reading it, so I want you to be familiar with it. We'll go through the steps of doing a soapstone, a diddles, a spa, as if we were going to write an analytical essay for it. We're not, but we're just going to go through those steps so you continue to get more comfortable and used to it. And you're reading chapters 1 and 2 for Heart of Darkness for Tuesday of next week. It says reminder, and you don't really know about this because I'm just telling you now, where this says imperialism notes video for Monday. With us taking a day to do some grammar stuff here with sentence structure, I was originally going to go over some things with imperialism as it pertains to Heart of Darkness, but we're not doing that. So I want you to watch the notes for imperialism with Heart of Darkness. It's on Google Classroom. So I reordered some stuff on Google Classroom. The two things up at the top right now would be the imperialism notes for Heart of Darkness. I'll explain how that works, and the Grapes of Wrath prompt number 1 template, so for you to work in. You don't have to turn anything in for the template. So it's marked as an assignment because that allows me to give you a Google Doc. But when you start getting like warnings, Heath, you have not turned in your template number 1, you don't have to turn anything in for me through Google Classroom. It just gives me the ability to give you a Google Doc that you can use. I know Madame Maragona uses Edpuzzle a little bit, so if you have her for class, you might have used it before. It says Imperialism, Heart of Darkness. Watch the video, complete the accompanying quiz questions. The link is going to take you to Edpuzzle, which is going to be a video of me teaching imperialism to a class from like last year. So I cropped it a little bit, edited it, so it's down to 32.5 minutes. So this should take you 32.5 minutes plus the time needed to answer 8 multiple choice questions. So as you watch the video, it's going to be me running through imperialism, hopefully some of which is going to be a review for you, and there's just going to be like 8 checking for understanding questions along the way. So I give the answers to the questions in the video, and then Grant will just hit the right answer. He's getting points. It's 8 points for the 8 questions. Not 8 points per question, but 8 points total. It'll go in as a quiz grade, which isn't meant to be scary. But if the quiz that you did last week for Chapter 5 of Grapes of Wrath is one that you're hoping to kind of improve upon, no, an 8 out of 8 won't fix something into a perfect 20 out of 20, but it helps as it would go towards that area. If you don't know the answer, you don't recall the answer, you have the ability to rewatch that portion of the video again. So I'm hopeful that there would be 11 8 out of 8s, maybe a 7 out of 8. Heath shouldn't be getting a 4 out of 8, kind of thing. I don't know why I picked on you. If I don't think you need to log on. If you do, it would be student Gmail because it's linked up through Google Classroom in that way. So I would try it in the next day or two just to make sure you can get there. And then if you run into any issues, we can try to figure those things out. I made the due date for it on Google Classroom Monday by midnight, 11:59. So you have through the weekend to take care of it, before we start going over some stuff with Heart of Darkness. One other thing, and I have it up on the board, folks are asking questions about Noodlebib because they're going to use for their works cited page for your rough draft. If you haven't logged on into Noodlebib, it is your old usernames that you used back in 9th grade. So it is the first 4 of your last name, first 3 of your first name, and then your graduation year. So if I were a junior in high school, it would be Kane, Joe, 20. And then your password is NHSD, unless you have changed it. Once you do that, it's going to ask you to revalidate your username. It's going to ask for a North Hills Library username and password. Both the North Hills Library username and password This is the one password that's not LupSwag, as most of them are, but it's NHLIB, NHLIB. All that means is you haven't used your account in like 3 months. So they're just revalidating that you are who you are. And it'll just ask a couple questions, like when you're going to graduate. You could change your graduation year to like 2028 and have Noodle Bib all throughout college as you study Euclidean and non-Euclidean and all that fun stuff. So that choice is up to you. So tomorrow we'll do I Have a Dream, Thursday, rough draft check. Make sure you bring in your paper copies for that. And then I also sent out a reminder last night of your weekly syllabus. I thought that was an easy way for you to have access to it as well. So that's there. Any questions with anything? All right. On your blank sheet of paper, I want you to write from a grammatical standpoint what you, and I know we're not saying definitions yet, what you would consider to be a simple sentence. I want you to write a simple sentence. So thinking simple, compound, complex, and you're going, oh my goodness, I forget this stuff. Think about it. Write a simple sentence. Have it pertain, though, to the grapes of wrath, just so it gives us some common denominators to kind of work with and stuff that might work into the essay. Doesn't mean you have to write a sentence that you're going to use in your essay, but write what you would consider to be a simple sentence that pertains to the grapes of wrath. And then we're going to call on some folks to share. There's only 11 of you, so the odds are pretty good at some point. Grant, you good? Look like you're getting ready to erase.
I'm always ready.
Okay. What do you got?
I have just the truck needs gas.
Nina, was in jail? Beef?
Jones are migrants.
Oops. Spell check doesn't like Jodes.
Who likes Joe?
It does. One Jode is fine. Zach?
The Grapes of Wrath is a lengthy story.
Okay. Jesse, we'll do one more.
Tom picks
Wow. These are some sentences. Are they all simple sentences? Yeah, they are. So write a complex one. Complex. Complex. And we might come back to our simple sentences too, but oops, I wrote compound, but I told you to write complex. The plot thickens. Should you give a sentence that's not complex, we're not going to yell at you. Any volunteers for complex sentence? This one makes people a little bit more nervous. You? How confident are you in the sentence that it's complex? 50-50 or less? Okay.
Let Jesse go first. He can embarrass himself.
I mean, Tom Picks Peaches was quite the sentence to leave with, so you have all the momentum.
although they were poor, the Jodes survived with what they had. And it's a comma.
You said survived with what they had. And you said comma after poor. Okay. Keep in mind, I'm not worried about to be verbs and all that stuff right now. Keep in mind, if you were to do something like this within the essay, there would be a change that we would make, specifically with your verbs. Not to be verbs. Yeah. So we would just take the D off survive with what they have. What could I'm not going to worry about that first R, and now I'll say I'll worry about to be verbs. What could I do to get rid of have? Because has, had, have still count as to be verbs. So still like going with one word, you know, with a more precise verb. Own, possess, you know, those kinds of things. The reason we're taking a look at sentence structure is I would say the two traits that you're going to find to be most useful, most helpful for you is going to be word choice, being precise with it. And not that, you know, with what they have is absolutely terrible, but when you take, and I'm looking big picture, when you take an AP exam down the road in May, I was looking up data from last year, and I want to say it was 556,000 and change students took the AP exam last year, the English language and composition. It's traditionally the one that the highest number of students take. So even though we don't look at it as being competition, you're in competition with 556,000 other students. You have essays that are getting scored and whatnot. You're going to have a lot of content that's probably going to be similar and very equal. So ways that you can start to distinguish yourself is going to be stylistically, and word choice being exact with verbs can be one thing to do that. Varying sentence structure can also be a way to do that. And I think these sentences for simple, they're all simple, and they're, for the most part, pretty simplistic as well. You know, if you're going to have a whole run of simple sentences, it's going to sound choppy. There's not going to be a whole lot of rhythm to it. At the same time, simple sentences can be wonderful. They can emphasize points. They provide clarity. If there's a point that you really need to reinforce, one way to do that is just to write a simple sentence, and then Alex's idea kind of resonates with the reader a little bit more. Okay, Nina. All right, we'll do it anyway.
Most of the family wants to go west.
Most of the family wants to go west? And then you said but?
Grandpa.
Did you do punctuation?
Yes.
Okay, what'd you do?
A comma after this.
Okay. And you're saying this is compound. Did you capitalize west?
Yes.
Why would you capitalize west? Why wouldn't you capitalize west? Anyone know?
Talking about the West.
If you are referring to the direction in which you're traveling, it would not be capitalized. If you are referring to it as location, so they are moving to the west, Jesse's family comes from the south, those would be capitalized. So most of the family wants to go west or wants to move west. That's going to be direction. So for me, it's going to go this way. It looks like east for you, pointing your way, so we'll go this way. So if you're talking about the direction in which they're traveling, it would be lowercase. If they are going to the west or in the west is where they hope to find more peaches and fruit and all that kind of stuff, at that point it'd be capitalized. Compound sentence? It's a compound sentence. You're right. So what's the difference? Besides having the word but in there.
Complex contains a dependent clause and an independent clause, while compound sentences contain the two independent clauses.
And you'll hear people use the term dependent clause and also subordinate clauses because of subordinate conjunctions going along with it. I tend to use dependent and independent as well. But yeah, if it's a complex sentence, you have two parts to the sentence. You have one part that is going to be an independent clause. It could be a sentence by itself. Although they are poor, the Jodes survive with what they own. Which part of that sentence is an independent clause? I could have this and it would be a complete sentence. If I were to have, although they are poor, and the subordinate conjunction is considered part of the clause, although they are poor, something needs to happen. What would happen if I switched it? The Jodes survive with what they own, although, and it might not make a whole lot of sense, but I'm just going to do this anyway. Although they are poor. Still a complex sentence. I made a boo-boo when I wrote it. And don't worry about the use of although not quite being the appropriate term and all that stuff. Anyone know what I did? It was the last thing I did. There's no comma. This is probably the most common, I don't want to say greatest as in most severe. Zach, how dare you have that extra comma? But it's probably the most common punctuation mechanical mistake that folks will use. And it probably, I'm not blaming the nice lady or man who taught you in 3rd grade, but it's probably somebody in elementary school who said you should put a comma when you pause, take a breath, whatever the case may be. If your sentence starts with a dependent clause and then you have an independent clause, you need a comma to separate the two. If your sentence starts with an independent clause and then you follow that up with a dependent clause, you do not want a comma. Of the subordinate conjunctions, I think the one that is most prevalent is probably the word because. And so people get in the habit of when the word because shows up, I need to put a comma in front of it. No, you really don't. There's also, for some folks, and it might be something that a mean English teacher said to you at one point, that would be you should not start a sentence with the word because. There's nothing wrong with that. All of the subordinating conjunctions that you have on here, you can start sentences with. So I could do something like, because they are poor, the Jodes decide to head west. Complete sentence, I'm fine. The Jodes decide to head west because they are poor. I wouldn't need to have a comma there at all. All right? What would be some other examples of complex sentences that you have?
Though they are hungry, comma, Jodes feel, I can't read. The Jodes track onward.
Is it trek onward? The Jodes trek onward, though they are hungry. I wouldn't need a comma for it. Though they are hungry, dependent clause. The Jodes trek onward. Yep. Emma?
The tractors moved down farms in order to make way for
So the tractors mowed. You said in order to? And then I forget what that part was.
make way for
Make way for new land. Okay. Same thing, wouldn't need a comma if I switched it. And this would be one that you could, flip. In order to make way for new land, comma, the tractors mowed farms. Anyone else want to throw one out? Trying to come up with a quick example here. The Jode families heads west because they lost their home. Complex? Punctuated correctly. Pronouns correct. Now Megan's nodding yes. In agreement with me going like this or in arguing against me? And I bet most people would probably write it this way. And I'm not one of those people that's gonna harp on the way that we speak versus the way that we write. They're two different things. Like when you speak, you're drafting. When you're writing, you got time to kind of work on it a little bit. This would be a type of sentence that I could see a lot of people writing, and there's a subtle pronoun issue. There's a problem. If I were heads, how would this be different if my verb, say I wrote Tom heads west because, what would I have to do?
Make it singular. So because he lost his home.
So, heads is a singular verb. The way I originally had the sentence was the Jode family heads west. Is that verb correct? Singular verb. It's the correct verb. I need to have parallel. I need to have verb, pronoun, subject agreement throughout. If my verb is singular, then that means my subject is singular, which would mean the pronouns that refer to my singular subject must also be singular. The Jode family heads west because, what would I put? Can't put he. It lost its home. Why? It is referred to a collective noun. It is a singular unit. There's multiple people, but it's a unit. The team, the family, the government mode homes, is going to be singular because it's a singular entity. Now this sentence up here, the Jodes survive with what's not what it owns, but what does they refer back to? The plural Jodes, okay? So family is the singular noun. If I said the members of the Jode family head west because they lost their home, I'm okay because now I'm going with members of it. So it's those subtle little things, and it's not that if you wrote that sentence, all of a sudden your A essay now becomes a B, and if you now have a to be verb, it's going to be a C type thing. But those are those little things that can sometimes make the difference between, something as simple as an 89 and a 90, something as simple as a 7 essay kind of compared to an 8 essay. But the more elements that you kind of tend to master, the better off it's going to end up being. Come up with a sentence that uses the word before. Just write a sentence that uses before. And it can start the sentence, it can be halfway through the sentence, doesn't matter. And Megan, we're going to call on you first. So all eyes will be looking at you. Although Zach has like a rainbow on his shirt, so he's kind of calling attention to what? Dolphin? Is a cat on a dolphin? With a cowboy hat with the rainbow. Yeah.
Well, it's so random.
I have two of these shirts. The other one has a shark. It's through space.
Wow, it's so random.
Cowboy hat too?
I think it does. I don't remember.
Mr. King, may I use the restroom?
Sure. Just sign out past there in the back.
It was like there were like blank spaces, and then there was like a win. There were like you had like a 25% chance of winning, and if you won, they just gave you 2 Bush tickets. People would win and then give them away because they didn't want
It was Bush, Weezer, and there was a third that was touring.
Bush wasn't performing with Weezer. It was Weezer and the Pixies.
Pixies. That's right. That's right. We got one?
Yeah. Well, does that have to be complex?
Nope. Just said want the word before.
The turtle crawls onto the street before it gets
So we have the crossed. The turtle, you said crossed onto the street? Oh, crawls. Thank you. Crawls onto the street before it gets hit by a car. Is it complex? Yeah, it is. Independent clause, the turtle crawls onto the street. I don't need a comma because the independent clause comes first. Before it gets hit by a car would be the dependent clause. I could switch it before it gets hit by a car, comma, the turtle crawls onto the street. What if I did the turtle crawls on the street before getting hit by a car? Complex. Grant's doing a no. Emma's just making facial gestures. She might eat her pinky. Alex is going stoic. And Chandler's going to refer to Gray as Gary for the rest of the week.
I already do that.
This one's not a complex sentence. Do you know what would you call it? A sentence.
I guess it would be simple.
It's a simple sentence. Simple sentences don't have to be short. What a simple sentence means is you have one subject, you have one predicate, and that's pretty much it. The turtle crawls on the street before getting hit by a car or the car. What's happening to the turtle? It's crawling onto the street. What's going to happen to the turtle? It's getting hit by a car. So it would kind of be similar to Tom picks a fight and goes to jail. That's a simple sentence. Some folks would be going, wait a minute, you have the word and, therefore it must mean it's a compound sentence because that's one of those fanboys. I have one subject. I have Tom. What's Tom do? He picks a fight. What else does he do? He goes to jail. It's the same subject. If I did Tom picks a fight, followed up with, or I guess it'd probably better go, Tom goes to jail after he picks a fight, that would be a complex sentence. Because in that case, I have Tom goes to jail, I have a subject, I have a predicate, after he picks, after he picks a fight, I have another subject with he and that predicate with picks a fight. What this would be, it's still a, the first one here, well not first, but on this list, this one would still be a simple sentence. And goes to jail, it's not a clause. A clause is going to have a subject and a verb. It would just be a phrase. So you can have a simple sentence that has the word because. You can have a simple sentence that uses the word once and all of that kind of stuff. So long as you have one subject, one predicate. So when we say, simple sentence, it doesn't mean you have to go, no offense, with the 3-word sentence, or the truck needs gas is 4 words, the Jodes are migrants, 4 words. You can still have lengthier sentences and it can still be considered simple. What is the benefit of complex sentences? They do a really good job at highlighting something. They highlight what? For the most part. Yeah, I mean, they highlight the subject, and really you have usually with a complex and a compound, but with a complex, you tend to highlight relationships between, it could be 2 different subjects, it could be 2 different events for the same person, but you tend to have more of a cause and effect, because, although, whenever, stuff like that. The word that will throw some folks off is going to be the Jodes head west. However, what would be something I could put after? They cannot find work. Okay? That sentence is not correct. I got a grammatical issue with it. This is a comma splice. I got a independent clause. The Jodes head west. However, they cannot find work. However, it could still be part of an independent clause. I'm joining them together with a comma. If I join two independent clauses with a comma, I have what's referred to as a comma splice. The easiest fix, and however is the one that really messes folks up because it's not for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. It's not one of those fanboys. What could I do? One little subtle punctuation change would take care of it. Semicolon. I could do a period. I could go with two sentences. Depending upon maybe the flow that you have, like if you've already done Tom Picks Peaches, they need gas. And I know, however, it still reads differently. Semicolon could be appropriate because it just kind of varies your sentence structure a little bit. Semicolon basically does what a conjunction does. You're taking two independent clauses, it joins them together, but there's still a relationship between the two. There's still they're similar enough that they would go together. There's kind of like a cause and effect with it. Compound sentences, but grandpa does not. Yes, this is going to be a compound. You got a comma. I could do the same thing, where I could put a period after west and go like that. Grandpa does not. I got two sentences. I could also just do what I did above. I could do semicolon. And I could absolutely go but. One thing you want to keep an eye on, because conjunctions tend to be words that we start to fall in love with, that we use a lot. Because gets commonly used. I know I use however a lot when I'm doing writing. So if you find yourself kind of falling into a pattern of repeatedly using a similar word over and over, you might want to switch it up. With the fanboys, can you see one of those conjunctions that is not but? That would be a pretty good replacement for because. Because is a word that folks use a lot. And here, let's use this sentence because the context always helps.
Oh.
Let's use this sentence as an example since we already have because. So what could I'm going to have a comma after west. For. The Jode family heads west for it lost its home. That tends to be a good one that can go in place of having because within the complex sentence. For your writing, your thesis, I would suggest being a simple sentence. You want your thesis to be pretty straightforward. So, examples that we had. Anyone write a thesis? Like, do you have one done? Emma, you have one?
Yeah.
What are you doing?
I have it. Okay. I have the social disruptions during the Dust Bowl. So I wrote unifying diction, graphic details, and symbolism.
Okay, let me get the devices. So unifying diction, you said graphic details, and symbolism?
Yes.
Okay.
Illustrate the social disruptions.
You went social disruptions, like multiple disruptions? Okay, during the Dust Bowl. That's a simple sentence. I got a compound subject. I got three devices. I have one verb, illustrate the social disruptions during the Dust Bowl. It's a simple sentence. It's clear. I know exactly what's going to happen with it. The sentences that are going to surround it, you're probably going to vary a little bit. I would say, so you're taking a look at social disruptions. What do you have in mind as like social disruptions?
Like family.
Like breaking apart?
Yeah.
Okay. Or coming together, since we have unifying. Okay.
I was gonna do like different families coming together for that one, and also like Casey was always emphasizing like the one God and how like they kept people together.
Okay. So first part of an introductory paragraph, what do you need? Thesis is the last part. What do you need for the first part? I need a hook, I need an attention grabber. And that's when I go family quotes on Brainy Quote and all that kind of stuff. I think it gets kind of old and generic if every time Medina starts an essay that you're going to start going with a quote. No offense, don't know if you do or not. Basically what you would want to do with your attention grabber, with your hook, and I'd say about 2 sentences, is I want to establish relevance. Why does it matter? What's the significance? What's the relevance to this? So I could start something with like, whereas many people consider a family to be a group of individuals. I'm not worrying about to be verbs because I'm just drafting, who are related to one another. By me starting off with whereas, what have I done now? I know this sentence is going to be complex. Whereas is my dependent clause, so I'm going to need a comma before it. Whereas many people consider a family to be a group of individuals who are related to one another, a family can be a collection of, how do I want to describe these people? With similar beliefs. Any examples come to mind? Not within the book, just in general. Thought we'd get something. Okay, so religion can unify people, and patriotic beliefs or values can bring individuals together. We're drafting. It's not the greatest attention grabber in the world. I wrote a complex and a compound sentence. Whereas many people consider a family to be a group of individuals who are related to one another, a family can be a collection of people with similar beliefs. Religion can unify people, and patriotic beliefs or values can bring individuals together. I don't know if Emma's going to write about religion and patriotic beliefs, but that would kind of start to be a transition into maybe an idea that you're going to get into. What do I need to mention now? I've done my attention grabber. I need to, before I get into my devices, I need to transition into the book. John Steinbeck explores this idea in his novel, The Grapes of Wrath. I have transitioned, into the book now. Now I know I'm focusing on Steinbeck. We don't really have time for it. What would I want to put in between The Grapes of Wrath and Unifying Diction? Say about 2 sentences. I just wrote a simple sentence, so I'd probably back it up with now maybe a complex and a simple, complex and compound. I want to give a general overview of the book. The novel details the trips of the Joad family as it heads west due to their poor living conditions. They face many trials and tribulations along the way as their family is threatened. Unifying diction, graphic details, and symbolism illustrate the social disruptions during the Dust Bowl. I got a pretty solid introduction now that I can begin to write my first paragraph. But just be aware of the sentences that you're using, how you're using them, the purpose of them, and that'll set you up to be in pretty good shape. I would keep this paper handy because it tends to be good for transitioning from one idea to the other, whether it's mid-sentence or from one sentence to another.